Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Here to continue our commitment to being transparent and accountable for what we're doing to serve so many Oregonians that are in need at this time, to talk about the efforts that we're taking, the challenges that we're still facing, and the progress that we're making. And fortunately, I do have some good progress that I'll be talking about with our processing of pandemic unemployment assistance or PUA claims in a little more detail in a moment. This has been a really hard time, and it continues to be a really difficult time for everyone. And taking a step back to look at why it's so challenging, I think is important. We've gone from the lowest unemployment rate in the state's history to the highest unemployment rate in the state's history. And that happened not over the course of a year, like most traditional recessions, but almost overnight. And that's been incredibly stressful on so many people whose rapidly saw their income just disappear, and on our hardworking employees who are doing their best to get benefits to people as quickly as possible. So besides the record number of people needing regular unemployment assistance, we've also seen the creation of several new programs that we've been creating at the same time. And the world around us is changing too, requiring us to adapt the usually very steady requirements of the unemployment insurance program to meet the very unusual circumstances of the world that we face during a pandemic. And doing that while also making sure to protect our own employees' health and safety. So this has been very challenging throughout the course of the pandemic. We've been constantly creating and refining programs, and we've had a constant, incredible push to hire people quickly, to train them quickly, and to get them the tools and workspace that they need quickly to be able to help people depending on them. And that work hasn't abated at all. It continues now, and it will continue for the foreseeable future. We're still working with the understanding that this is a crisis and that there are so many Oregonians that are still themselves in crisis. So it's urgent for us to get everybody their benefits as quickly as possible. We've done a lot. We know that there is a lot more still to be done. And I am going to share a little bit today about what remains to be done, but also some of the progress that we're making. We are seeing significant progress, and importantly, we're seeing the pace of that progress also increase a lot. Since mid-March, we've paid out $3.4 billion in benefits. That's an incredible amount, not just for the individuals who receive them, but also for the Oregon communities and economies that depend on that money being spent locally to help support local businesses and other Oregonians. For the PUA program, late in the day on July 17th, we launched our new Pua filing system. It's been a big improvement. It's not a perfect fix for everything, but it has made a massive difference in how quickly we're able to address the work. We've had over 115,000 weekly claims for benefits handled by this new system, and each of those would have required staff intervention in the past process. That's about 3 weeks worth of work for the team of about 60 people that we had focused on that work. And that means that all of those people are able to work on the other things that are holding up payments so that we can more quickly get people their benefits. We're also making other improvements on how we're handling the PUA claims. I've shared in the past that we've identified some issues that can cause pauses in payments with regular unemployment insurance. And one of those was when people are told to restart their claims. We've been able to largely address that with regular unemployment insurance. And this week, we were able to start applying those same tools to the pandemic unemployment assistance claims. So going forward, we expect to see many fewer people getting that restart message that can cause a pause in their PUA benefit payments. And there's other good news with the PUA program as well, in that we've gotten much quicker at processing those PUA applications. We recognize that this was one of the biggest pain points when we started Focus PUA several weeks ago. At that time, we estimated that we had about 70,000 PUA applications that hadn't yet been processed, and our goal was to process those by August 8th. As of now, actually as of the end of last week, we've processed about 70% or 50,000 of those claims. And again, the pace that we're able to do this at is increasing rapidly. Last week, we processed 21,000 PUA applications, That's more than 5 times the rate that we were processing them when we began the Focus PUA project. We have about 19,000 claims left from that original estimated 70,000 to work through, although we have continued to receive some amount of new claims since then. We've paid out $65 million in PUA benefits since that program began, and that doesn't include the additional FPUC $600 payments that have gone along to people who received those benefits. We are solidly on track to meet our August 8th deadline, and this is good news for people that have been waiting to get their benefits. One of the things that we've done to do this is hire incredibly quickly. We have about 420 people that are working on processing PUA claims now. Last week, I shared that we had received other good news that recent U.S. Department of Labor guidance appears to allow Oregon to have people report their net income instead of their gross income on their weekly PUA claims. This will allow more Oregonians to receive more benefits, and that's a wonderful help for people that are in need. We're working on guidance. We want to make sure that we do this carefully and that it addresses many of the different situations that people are in. We anticipate getting some guidance next week on how people should be reporting their weekly earnings as they continue to file weekly claims. And it may be a week after that before we're able to give the more detailed process that will allow people to seek retroactive adjustments for prior weeks that they've already claimed. We know this is important, but we also don't want to slow down the good momentum that we have of getting PUA claims processed and benefits starting to be paid to people that have been waiting too long already. For now, people should continue reporting their gross income until the new guidance is issued, and that will help avoid potential overpayments or other claim complications. With the regular unemployment insurance program, I feel that every week that I talk about this, there's another record. So between March 15th and July 18th, we are still at a record level of claims with over 533,000 initial claims for regular unemployment insurance having been filed. We have fewer than 1,200 of those claims that haven't been processed yet, and all of those are from this month. We're processing these very quickly, and that is great news. I've mentioned before that processing the claims is needed, and nobody gets their benefits until the claim is processed. There are still some additional steps for some people, and the biggest challenge that we're facing now is with the adjudication process. There are a lot of claims where we're required to do that adjudication, and it is taking too long right now. We're working to staff up quickly, and we're working on other ways to speed up getting benefits to people, even when their claims do have issues that we're required to adjudicate. The hiring is going well. We now have more than 210 adjudicators doing this work. We had about 80 when the pandemic began, and we plan to hire at least 100 more. And we're also exploring opportunities to contract with resources to help with specific parts of the process so that we can get through the work even quicker. Workshare continues to be an incredible benefit for a number of Oregon businesses and workers. We have over 52,000 workers that are participating in Workshare, and that's for almost 1,500 different employers. Since March 15th, we've paid out about $36 million in Workshare benefits alone. I want to talk about the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or FPUC program, which provided the extra $600 per week for so many people. That federal program was set for a certain time period, and it ended as of last week. For most people, they're claiming and receiving their benefit payments this week for that last week covered by the FPUC program. For people who haven't yet received their benefit payments for prior weeks that are covered by the FPUC program, they can rest assured that when they receive those benefits, they will still receive the $600 payments for those weeks. However, for this week and on, when people get benefits paid, it will not have that extra $600. And that's going to be a very big impact on those people who will see a huge decrease in their weekly benefits. It'll also be a really big impact on Oregon communities and economies. So far, Oregon has paid out $2.2 billion in FPUC benefits alone, and that amount will continue to go up as we make retroactive payments for people who are still waiting. Congress is considering several possible alternatives for a new program to extend or replace the FPUC program. And we're working closely with our congressional delegation and with the governor's office to make sure that people know which proposals will be able to implement quickly and get benefits to people quickly, and which would be much more complicated and might unfortunately mean that benefits come too late to be of significant assistance to Oregonians. You're hearing national discussions now about how difficult it is for states, whether they have modernized technology systems or not, to implement some of the proposals being considered. This is frankly the same type of issue that underlied a lot of the programs created by the CARES Act, but they're getting a lot more public discussion now, likely because so many states have seen the challenges realized from implementing these important programs. A theoretically great policy doesn't help anyone if it's so complicated that it takes us months to get the benefits out to the people that need them. Governor Brown has supported our efforts here. She submitted a letter to congressional leaders on Monday asking them to have a flat additional amount of benefits added as additional unemployment benefits. This is something that Oregon and other states can implement much more quickly and will ensure that the benefits are actually quickly provided to the people that depend on them so much. We continue to work on improving our staffing, as I've mentioned. When we started this pandemic, we had about 100 people handling claims. We now have close to 1,050. So the 420 that I mentioned that are working on pandemic unemployment assistance, over 500 people working on regular unemployment assistance, and over 100 that are working on work share claims. In addition, the adjudication is that key area where we're focused on hiring even more people, but we've already drastically increased staffing there. Again, from about 80 before the pandemic to more than 210 now. I did want to address the issue with our phones. We know that since the pandemic began, people have had difficulty getting through to us, have faced long wait times, and calls being dropped. We've been continually upgrading our telephone infrastructure, and recently we were attempting to make a very large addition of additional capacity so that more people could get through more quickly. Unfortunately, there were challenges with implementing this that manifested last week in periods of the phones not working or not working well and more calls being dropped. We escalated these issues with the multiple vendors that are responsible for making our telephone system work. And it does appear now that the phone system is much more stable, that people are better able to get through, and that there are many fewer calls being dropped. We know that the wait times are still too high, and we continue to work on additional staffing, additional capacity, and of course, getting people's claims going smoothly so that fewer people have to call us to get their benefits. We continue to work on outreach to help educate people about how best to access their benefits. We will be hosting another webinar on the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program tomorrow at 1 p.m. Registration is limited, but you can register through a link that's available on our social media channels. And we continue to upgrade our new website, unemployment.oregon.gov, with additional information. We're continuously adding new information, and that's where we'll put new information about any additional federal legislation, other federal programs, and guidance about how to report the net earnings for people that are filing weekly PUA claims. So please do continue to check unemployment.oregon.gov frequently for new information. We are making a lot of progress, and importantly, we still recognize how much work needs to be done. I continue to be so sorry for the delays in getting payments to people and how long it has taken. It's not a lack of effort or caring or understanding how desperate this is. It's just a matter of the vast number of people needing assistance and the complexity of so many new programs. We are absolutely committed to getting people their benefits as quickly as possible and to keeping our employees safe while they focus so hard on doing that. Our employee safety continues to be a top priority. There is a lot more work to be done, and I'll continue to share what we're doing and what the outcome of that work is. We've been sharing what our plans are, and we've been following through and doing what we indicate we intend to do. And very importantly, as we do that, we're learning quickly and rapidly adjusting our plans so that we can get people benefits more quickly. We're starting to see the impact of that now as benefits are going out more and more quickly, and we're able to help people better as well. And finally, again, we hope that Congress will soon enact additional legislation that will provide much needed support for Oregonians, and that they'll do it in a way that will let us get those benefits out as quickly as possible. Thank you all, and I'm happy to take questions now.
Thanks, David. First question is from Jake Thomas with Salem Reporter. Please go ahead, Jake. Jake Thomas with Salem Reporter. Just one moment, I am still unmuting people. Lindsay Nadrich with Coin. Please go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, hey, thanks. Just wondering, do you know how many claims are stuck in adjudication?
We don't have an exact count, Lindsay. We know that it's in the tens of thousands, and that's one of the reasons that we're focused on increasing capacity so quickly. It's hard to know the exact number. One of the reasons is that we're going through the claims that look like they might need adjudication and seeing which of those are issues that we can resolve more quickly just by some quick follow-up or by reviewing some more detailed information that we may already have. But it is still a real significant number. Some of those people may have gotten benefits for some weeks, but they are still issues that are probably holding up payments for tens of thousands of people.
And then if I could ask, so last week you said guidance would come out this week for the gross earnings issue, but now you're saying it's next week?
Correct. We're still working on that, and some of the same people that have to put together that guidance are working on some of the ways that we can improve the adjudication process. And we're also helping smooth out some of the issues we discovered with the new PUA application as it went live. We want to make sure to get that guidance out. We know it's going to help a lot of people, but we're continuing our attempt to focus our efforts on what helps the most people the most quickly. And we think continuing the focus on getting payments started for people is important.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next, Mike Ragaway with the Oregonian. And just a reminder, the phone lines are open, so please mute yourselves if your phone is not muted. Mike Ragaway, please go ahead.
Hey, David. The adjudication timeline, is that still 12 to 14 weeks?
We think that that is still the good estimate. It shifts quite a bit depending on how many new issues we identify as we process the claims that hadn't yet been processed, and as we get through them, and importantly, as we get more people trained up, but that's still looking like about what it is for the newly identified issues. Okay, and then just a couple real quick questions. Any idea how many unprocessed PUA claims there are overall, you know, from the original 70,000 and new ones that have come in? And any more positive tests among your staffers for coronavirus? We haven't had any more positive COVID-19 tests among our employees. In terms of the number of PUA applications, I can't give you an exact number. And one of the reasons I think I've mentioned earlier that we knew that there were already some duplicate applications for PUA benefits, where people may have submitted it and then understandably anxious that they hadn't received benefits, submitted another application, or maybe have done it both by faxing and mailing, for instance. We don't have the exact count of how many are duplicates until we touch those applications. And we do know that we received some more duplicate applications when the new Google Forms went live, where some people did refile their initial applications. We're already finding those. So it's 19,000 of that original 70,000 estimate that haven't been processed yet. We have received several thousand new applications since then, but once we take out the duplicates, we still think that by August 8th, we'll be pretty much current and then able to process any new applications within a week or two, kind of in the same timeline as we do for regular unemployment during non-pandemic times.
Thank you.
Next, Bill Poehler with the Statesman Journal. Please go ahead, Bill. Bill Poehler with the Statesman Journal. Please go ahead, Bill. Next, Kate Davidson with OPB. Please go ahead, Kate.
Hi, a couple questions, and this may seem very basic, but I wonder if you could just express what is the single biggest issue that is slowing down the processing of PUA claims right now?
The single biggest issue slowing it down, I think, I'll give you two issues. I think one is just the volume of claims that accumulated compared to what we normally have for regular claims to process. 70,000 in some years is an entire year's worth of claims. And that's what we had when we started the Focus PUA project. So that just vast number is one of the key challenges that we've had. The other thing is that it is complicated to have to look at everything you do for a regular unemployment claim to see if they're eligible for benefits in Oregon or in any other state and all of the normal things, plus the additional couple of factors that you have to look at for PUA. So it is a lot to have to do, and that interplay between the regular unemployment insurance programs and the PUA program can get pretty complicated. That's probably one of the more common technical complexities that causes challenges.
Just to follow up on Mike's question a little bit, you mentioned the 50,000 by the end of last week had been processed, which is different from being approved, right? Do you have any breakdown of how many of the 70,000 PUA claims have been approved, how many have been paid, and maybe how many are in the tax department right now?
I don't have any numbers for how many specifically are being reviewed by people that work in our tax section. We've paid PUA benefits to about 30,000 people, and we know that there are a number more where the payments are coming quickly as we address those restart issues or some of the other common issues that we're being able to work on. So we certainly have had a number of PUA applicants who aren't eligible for PUA. Most of those are because they are receiving regular unemployment insurance benefits, but there are just some people that unfortunately don't qualify for any of the federal programs that we administer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Peter Wong, please go ahead, Peter, with Pamplin Media.
Hi. I understand Workshare is heavily dependent, as you've mentioned over previous weeks, Workshare is heavily dependent on manual entry. I understand that some errors in manual entry have led to overpayments at several participating employers. Do you know how widespread that problem is in terms of either employers and also I do know from a previous experience, if you're paid something that you're not entitled to, you are expected to pay it back. So how widespread is that problem going to be, if that is a problem?
I can give you some general context that I hope is helpful. Even in normal times, making sure that all the benefit payments are accurate is a challenge. All of the unemployment programs are based on weekly eligibility. So when you have, even during what now look like really slow work period times for us with maybe 20,000 people a week getting benefits, that's 20,000 weeks of benefits that have to be reviewed to see if people meet all of the requirements, and mistakes do get made, or we, even if there's no mistake, we learn more information later and that results in an overpayment. When you have hundreds of thousands of people that are filing benefits, it's that much more challenging. And when we have hundreds of employees that are brand new, that have done their best and done an amazing job at learning really complex problems and doing huge amounts of work, there's bound to be some errors. So we absolutely know that there are some overpayments. There always are. It's probably going to be at an increased rate right now because we have so many new employees that don't have as much experience, and we are working so hard to get so many people their benefits with a number of brand new programs. So that's something that we continue to monitor. Unfortunately, the metrics of how those are measured under the federal system lag quite a bit in time. So we know that it's happening. We're not seeing a massive widespread increase. We have seen some issues where manual data entry causes overpayment. As soon as we find those, we address them. As you mentioned, we do recoup those payments, overpayments. If it's something that the person didn't cause at all themselves, then the ways that we recover those benefits are much more limited. And typically the way that we recover them is just by offsetting them from future benefits. So for instance, if somebody received an extra $100 in benefits one week, it may essentially just be an advance of the benefits that they would otherwise have received the following week. If somebody does it intentionally to try to defraud the system, then that's a very different category, and there's a lot more serious sanctions.
Okay. I have one quick follow-up on a different angle. The department hasn't named its computer vendor yet. I think you said a few weeks ago that obviously there are other priorities that the agency has right now, but just want to get an update if there's any update on that subject.
No, we haven't named the vendor yet. We are still working towards issuing that notice of intent to award. As you mentioned, modernization is absolutely still a key priority for the agency. But in terms of priorities, it's not the urgent thing that has to happen today to get people their benefits. So we're balancing that, and we're also wanting to make sure that we learn from our experience and from other states' experiences through the pandemic what's needed so that we make the best decision to have the best vendor build the future for unemployment in Oregon.
Okay, thanks. I'm done, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Tom Cusack with Oregon Housing Blog. Please go ahead, Tom. Tom Cusack?
Yes, I'm sorry. I have a question about the governor's letter. I looked quickly on her website and I didn't find anything. Is there a way that you can tell us how we get a copy of the letter that she sent in the extension of the Fpuc?
I can't tell you right now, this moment, how to do that, but we can certainly follow up. Yeah, we're happy to share that.
Another follow-up question related to the drop-off in the Fpuc, at least temporarily. That's a substantial number of payments that are made every week. Is there any opportunity there to redeploy staff from that activity to something else?
So unfortunately, for those additional payments, most of the work that was done to make those payments happen was done up front to make it largely automated. And those additional $600 payments really tag along with any other payment that's being made. So having those payments go away doesn't really free up staff capacity. Our biggest concern is that if there's a new program that is really complex and really difficult, it could actually take a significant amount of staff capacity to implement that. From our business side, the people that are most expert in these complex programs, and from the technology side to actually make those payments work and get out to people.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Keaton Thomas with KATU. Please go ahead, Keaton.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'm additionally also looking at Fpuc, and I'm just looking at some of the different proposals they've discussed, and I've seen some of the reporting nationally about how it's such a problem with states that you've mentioned. But I guess my question is, like, under your leadership, is OED any better suited to handle some sort of new federal policy than it was when we started all of this a few months ago?
That's a good question. I think in some ways we're in a slightly better position in that we have certainly additional resources, and the initial huge onslaught of regular unemployment insurance claims has been largely handled, at least those initial steps. We certainly still have the challenges in other areas, but instead of having maybe 50 fires to fight to make sure that everybody is getting their benefits, several of those have put out, and a number of the others are a lot smaller. So in that regard, I think the agency is better suited. I think I'm certainly doing everything I can to share with policymakers what would make a particular proposal easier or harder to implement. Ultimately, it's whatever's in the legislation that we will have to actually implement. I do think that there's also certainly been a lot more communication just generally between our agency and congressional delegation, state legislators, the governor's office, since this entire pandemic and the economic crisis that it caused has really hit us. So I think we're probably better situated now than during the original onset. That being said, some of these proposals are still very complex and are huge deviations from how the unemployment insurance systems have normally run. So they would still be incredibly complicated in some cases to implement.
And then to follow up on that, I just wanted to know, I saw an estimate that said, for example, if they go to $200 a week, it could ultimately lead to more layoffs around the country, presumably then more people asking for benefits. And so similar to that other question I had is, are you better suited now to adjust to more layoffs moving forward?
For that, I think that we are in a better position. Again, we're not caught up, so any additional work is certainly a challenge, but we have hired hundreds of people. So, we have 10 times as many people doing claims processing now than we did a few months ago. And a lot of those people, even though they haven't worked for us for very long, have really picked up on things quickly and certainly have a lot more experience than they did when this first started. So we have more people with more training, more capacity. So in that regard, if it's only an increase, and I'm saying that recognizing that it is a big deal, but if it's only an increase in the number of people needing the existing benefit programs, I think we're in a much better place now than we were back in mid-March when this first came on all at once.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keaton. Dick Hughes, please go ahead. Dick Hughes.
Thank you very much for holding these weekly chats. My question is a bit complex, and I apologize for that. Going back to what you were saying about there are duplicate applications coming in, and people are calling, trying to get through on the various phone lines, and they're maybe filing again, and then going through the email thing that you set up on the web page. That duplicates a lot of time for the potential claimants and for the staff. This ongoing treadmill thing. Is there any way to set up one single system that says email or whatever, just email us and we'll let you know where you are in the queue and what's happening with your claim, so that people aren't constantly duplicating and causing more work for the staff?
That's a really good question, and it's one that we have struggled with throughout this crisis. We don't think that there is one simple way to do that. It does create additional work for us, and it creates additional effort for the people trying to contact us. But for instance, with our phone lines, which normally is our kind of default and the best way, because in non-crisis times, people can get through And regardless of what their issue is, we can pretty quickly route them to the appropriate person with the right expertise to help them. That just became overwhelmed almost immediately with the record number of people needing assistance. And we tried to create new channels of communication that also were just almost immediately overwhelmed. We do have more staff now. We have more capacity for a lot of those channels, so that certainly helps. One of the key things that, although it's very early in its use, so we're still refining it, but we think it will offer a lot of benefit, is the Contact Us form on our new website. This is really the first tool that we've had that allows us to more effectively get the issue to the people that have the right expertise, so that somebody isn't calling a general phone number or whatever phone number they were able to find that might get them through to someone, even if that person doesn't have the right skill set or experience to be able to address their issue. And it's also the first tool that really lets us prioritize everything based on how long people have been waiting. Up until now, particularly for some of the more manual processes like PUA, it really was a matter of who happened to get through on the phone line that would be helped. And with the Contact Us forum, we're able to go through and sort those based on the weeks that people are waiting for benefits on and address those people that have been waiting the longest first. So it doesn't magically give us more capacity to answer every claim in one day or in 1 week, but it does let us to focus on the people that have been waiting the longest, that are in the most desperate situations. And those are the people that understandably tend to be communicating more repeatedly, because we know that they just need the assistance and that they're anxious to get through to us any way that they might be able to.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, I went online, and before this event, I went online and looked at that form, so I'd be familiar with it. And I don't remember the exact dates, but it says, don't contact us unless such and such dates. And I'm guessing that other people then are still trying to call or still trying or refiling or whatever because they can't use that form. Does it make sense to open up the form to anyone, or is it just something that can never be resolved?
I won't say that it can never be resolved. It can't be resolved overnight. The core underlying issue is just that we have over 500,000 applications for benefits. And I mentioned earlier that it's not just getting the benefit started, it's that each week there's the opportunity for an issue to potentially come up that needs to be addressed, or somebody is moving, or they have something else where they have a question or some issue that needs to be addressed. So it's just that vast volume of people needing assistance with their claims, and the number of people that we have with enough expertise to address all of those questions while also processing all of the claims. And that's really where the challenge is. We are getting people that are using that form that are filing about weeks that are more recent than the ones that we have posted on there. Our intent is, as we are able to work through the people that have been waiting the longest, those dates will move up closer and closer. And for people that do submit forms, for instance, that are more recent than the time period that we've said on the website, we have those. We won't be working on those until we get all of the others addressed, though. And again, that we know that that's painful for the people who still need help with their claim, but it is really the best way for us to try to focus on the people who have been waiting the longest and are most likely to be the people in the most desperate situation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Next, Claire Withicombe with Statesman Journal. Please go ahead, Claire.
Thanks. Hi, David. I had a question about the adjudication process. I wondered, what's your best estimate of how many more staff you would need to handle adjudication quickly, and is staff the main barrier to going through that process quickly?
The number of people that we have to do it really is the biggest barrier. A lot of the work that has to be done is one-on-one interaction to really find out about any particular situation. One of the most common being why someone either quit their job or why they were terminated, and to talk to both the employer and the employee to find out what happened so that we can make a decision. And that requires time, and it requires time by people that have experience doing that kind of work and a pretty detailed understanding of the unemployment insurance laws so that they can apply those laws correctly. Our goal is to get over 300 adjudicators. I mentioned that we're already over 210, so we're well on the way there. Just having the people alone will not be enough to get through all of those as quickly as we would like. And that's why we are looking at some of those other options. I mentioned that we're looking at where we might be able to use additional resources, whether it's contracted resources or employees who normally don't do the adjudication work here, to do pieces of that work so that we can just get more efficient. It may not be the most ideal way to do the adjudication process, but it may be a way for us to get many more claims through the process more quickly. So we're working on those kinds of process changes and some other ideas that may let us help people more even as that process is going on.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. Do you have a goal as far as how quickly you want the adjudication process to work in an ideal world?
Sure. So the normal standard for adjudication, and this is the standard that the federal government has for all state workforce agencies like the Oregon Employment Department, is that it should take 21 days for most cases for you to resolve the issue once you identify that there's something there that needs adjudication. So that's a 3-week target. I will say that Oregon and many other states historically have not met that target, even during normal times. And a lot of that is due to the pretty intensive amount of work needed to do the adjudication process and the historical underfunding from the federal government for administering the unemployment insurance programs. So that has been kind of a long-standing barrier. And then certainly with the onset of the pandemic, it just magnified the problem overnight and exponentially. But our goal is to get to that federal target of having most adjudication issues resolved within 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Tracy Berry with Barrett, Fox, and Berry. Please go ahead, Tracy.
Hi there. Good afternoon. It seems like when we chatted a couple weeks ago about how agile your programmers could be once they knew what Congress was going to do, that you said best case scenario, Congress comes up with something by July 31st. That way you can just make some tweaks in the existing $600 payment program. Clearly that's not going to happen. And one of the things I've seen that I've read from other states around the country is concerns that even when Congress does pass something, got to still wait for some federal guidance on how it's going to be implemented. And if we go to this 2-tier thing where we start with a flat rate and then go to a percentage of income, especially with PUA claims, that could be a challenge because you'd have to gather all the data to determine the previous incomes on those folks. You talk about the discussions you're having right now with your programmers and even with other states as you try to anticipate a program you're not sure what the final result will look like.
Sure, and we certainly are having discussions. Our technology experts here we're talking to at a high level. We're trying to not take up a lot of their time because they're still doing coding work that's needed to implement the prior CARES Act programs. If nothing else changed, we have months of work ahead for those people to do to make sure that things go smoothly. So we're talking at a high level, but until we have a pretty good idea of what's really going to be needed to be implemented, we're trying not to pull them away from the work that they're doing each day. We're communicating with other states pretty regularly. There's a national association where states talk to each other and share thoughts about what could work well, what challenges might be, what strategies might be able to overcome those. I think you hit on a lot of them. At this point, I don't see any scenario where there's not a lapse in those additional payments because we're here towards the end of the week where we're paying the last week of FPUC payments, and the new program hasn't passed in any House of Congress yet. If it's a really straightforward, just flat dollar amount, it probably is a matter of a few weeks for us to implement that. You mentioned the federal guidance, and that is a challenge. One good example is that we just received that significant guidance last week about the PUA program that we've been operating for months that will require some retroactive changes. So we're always trying to balance what the risks are of getting too far out ahead of the guidance, but also not wanting to wait to get started. If it's a straightforward program, we have a pretty good sense of how the US Department of Labor usually looks at these, so we'd be able to do it pretty well. If it's the really complex scenarios where it's a percentage of past income, that will be incredibly difficult on the programming side. And you mentioned one of the other key complications is, particularly for people in the PUA program, those are people that are, for the most part, never in our system normally. It really was a program designed to capture people that usually can't get unemployment insurance. So we don't have the same kind of data for them. And we would have to find a new way to collect all that information and then apply that in this new program to a new formula to figure out the benefits. That's why that scenario has us so nervous, and why we're working with other states to make sure that policymakers understand just how challenging that would be.
Quick follow-up. My recollection is that when you embarked on doing so much of this new programming, you actually had to bring some people in who had retired because they knew the programming system, were familiar with it. Are those people still working on retainer? Are you training new people on those older programming languages? Or I don't know, maybe there are vendors who specialize in that. I'm kind of curious how your crew is built.
Sure. So those retired employees are still here. They're incredibly dedicated, and they're helping us work through this. We do also have new employees that are learning the systems, although they're certainly not as expert as the people that helped write a lot of the code. And there are vendors out there that know COBOL. The challenge is that you have to not just know the language, you kind of have to know what was already written in that language pretty in depth before you can go in and effectively start making changes without having a high risk of causing other problems. So there is a pretty long learning curve, but we are getting people on that learning curve so that they're more able to help us as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Just opening the line up to anyone that I missed or anyone who would like to ask an additional question before we wrap up. Okay.
David, this is Keaton again with K2. I guess just one simple question is, you mentioned it, you kind of gave us an answer, but even if it's $200 flat or if it's a simple extension, are you still saying even that could take a few weeks for you guys to implement and you would see a lapse even if it's really simple?
Yes. Even if it's the most simple version of just changing the dollar amount, we need to change the dollar amount in the coding. That's being applied to a number of different benefit programs, and we need to do testing to make sure that it doesn't have unintended consequences. And we need to get, it's not just cutting the check, it's making sure that it flows through all of the processes and back to the federal reporting that we're required to do appropriately. And, this week is for people that are kind of in an ongoing cycle, they've started to receive their benefits and they're claiming each week. This week is the last week that we will be paying them their $600. So even if the legislation were to pass today and be signed into law, we would not be able to start making those payments under the new program next week. It just takes longer than that to do the coding.
Thanks.
This is Dick Hughes, and I would just like to go back to a basic question that comes up I guess in every one of these. Is there one thing you would recommend to people that they do if they're concerned about their benefits and where they're at and haven't heard things?
I would give two suggestions. One is to look at the new website because we are trying, as I mentioned, to put a lot more information up there. And for some people, it will answer questions. We're trying to push more information out also about what some issues might be as we discover them with claims and what we're doing to address them. and about the webinars where we're also providing additional help and information. The kind of the second part to that, though, would be that if you haven't heard anything and you have been waiting a long time beyond the date range that we have on that contact us form, then please do contact us using that form. We're looking at those, we're prioritizing them based on how long people have been waiting. And if you've been waiting beyond that timeline, we want to know so that we can make sure that we're actively working on that claim to get it resolved.
Well, just a point of clarification. When you say waiting, is that for the time when you filed the application, or for people who realized, like with the PUA, that they might have been eligible back in March but have just recently filed? Is it the date of the application or the date of when they might have been eligible?
So you hit upon one of the challenges that we had early on with trying to prioritize this work. We're really looking at the week that people are seeking benefits for, not the filing date, because we know that some people had difficulty getting through or may not have even realized that they were eligible for benefits. And if they're talking about benefits from, 9 weeks ago, then they've been waiting 9 weeks to get those benefits, even if they didn't know until recently that they could seek them. So it's the date for which they're seeking the benefits, not the date that they filed their claim.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Jack.
Can I ask one more question? This is Kate from OPB. I wanted to ask you about this federal court ruling out of New York that basically is asking the state to expedite payments to Uber and Lyft drivers and create a task force to help expedite those payments because of difficulty accessing earning records. Is there anything in this ruling that has ripple effects in Oregon or the way that you think about processing applications for Uber and Lyft drivers?
So I will disclose I haven't read that court decision yet. I don't think that it's likely to have an impact largely because the definition of who's an independent contractor and who's an employee, which is really the core of that problem, is different state to state. We are, and I'm hesitating a little bit because I want to make sure that I'm using the right language. We either have or are about to put some information on our public website where we did talk to Lyft, who agreed to let us share some information to help guide people as to which program to apply for. We appreciate them doing that because a couple times in these discussions, it's come up that there are very strict confidentiality provisions where we really can't talk about individual businesses or workers, but they understood the challenge that this was creating for people not knowing which type of benefits to apply for. So we do have some language that they agreed we could share that I don't know if it's gotten onto our website yet, but if it hasn't, it will be up there soon.
This may sound like a naive question, but is there not just one formula in the state for understanding who gets regular UI and who should apply for PUA?
There really isn't, because there's multiple ways that you can get PUA benefits. The most common routes are people that either don't have enough earnings, so they don't meet the thresholds for having earned enough money or worked enough hours to get regular unemployment. And they may be regular employees, but they can get PUA benefits. There's also people who are regular traditional employees, but there are a number of statutory carve-outs where certain types of work just aren't covered by the unemployment insurance program. So there's some agricultural work, there's a number of very specific and some more general exclusions. And then there's a big issue, which is the independent contractor one, which comes into play most often. And there is one test that we apply, but it's not a real bright line. It requires us to look at a number of different factors and weigh them on a case-by-case basis. So it's not an easy matter. It's not as simple as saying, if you receive this tax form from the business at the end of the year, then this is the benefit program that you're entitled to. It is pretty complicated, and there's not a single formula that you can apply to it.
Is that test publicly available, though?
It is, and it's in or it's 670.600, I believe, but we have it on our website, and that's something I can follow up afterwards with.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up to that? I guess, so I'm wondering, so before, I've had a bunch of people who drive for Lyft and Uber ask what program to apply for. And before you said you couldn't talk about specific employers, so you couldn't give a specific answer, but you're saying you can use other people to give that answer on the website. And because you're saying that there are Lyft drivers who have agreed to share that language. And if that was the case, I could have given you somebody like 2 months ago, I think, who would have been willing to be that example to get that answer.
And just so you all know, I just chatted out the question that's on our website. So if you want to take a look at that, that is the information that we are sharing.
Thank you for that, Arian. So the issue is that both workers and businesses have the right to confidentiality about information related to everything that they do with us, essentially related to payroll records, to filings, to unemployment insurance claims. So it's not just the individual person seeking benefits whose confidentiality we are required to preserve, it's also the business. So that's why previously we were not able to make a general statement. As I said, Lyft has agreed to some language that we can use regarding their business structure, and Arian provided that link. And it essentially is them agreeing to let us share some language to direct people to what is most likely to be the quickest application process. Even here, there are some complications because sometimes people that are in one category of benefit program now, so for instance, everything that they're doing now is independent contractor work. If they did have regular employment earnings previously, those earnings may be enough to mean that they are actually going to get benefits under the regular unemployment program. But certainly this language is a better signpost than we were able to provide before.